Welcome back in here to the Jordy Culotta Show, live here on this Wednesday, presented by Geaux Chevrolet. Speaking of Geaux, check out Geaux 247, Geaux 247 is where you're looking for all the updated recruiting information, anything you may be looking for at SEC Media Days. LSU picked up a commitment this week as they get in on one of the top running backs in the state of Louisiana, as we saw TreVonte Citizen pledge his commitment to LSU. Makes it 15 now with the Tigers and Coach Ed Ogeron. We always go to Geaux 247 when we're looking for our recruiting information, which means that we will link up now with one of the best in the business, Sonny Shipp, who we talked to here a couple of times on the Jordy Culotta Show, is back with us here on this Wednesday morning. Sonny, good morning. How are you, man?
Good, man. What's happening, brother?
Oh, same old stuff, man. Just getting back from Hoover earlier this week, where Ogeron and the crew were talking to the SEC media as they went through the gauntlet. The same day they pick up another commitment as TreVonte Citizen out of Lake Charles pledges to LSU. Kevin Falk, Jake Peets in the LSU offense. What do the Tigers get in Citizen's commitment?
Man, I tell you what. You know, when you look at what Ed Ogeron and his staff have done with this 2022 class, and a lot of this started, a lot of this 2022 recruiting started, even 2 years ago, but even last year, going through the pandemic, going through a 5-5 season, you're 3-5, going into the early signing period. And for LSU to be able to kind of mop up like they have, coming off of all of the turmoil that they had last year, you just really got to tip your hat to that staff, because they've really done a great job of circling around these top 10, top 12 prospects in Louisiana, and just doing a fantastic job on them. And Citizen is one of the latest top 10 prospects in the state to jump on board with LSU. And it wasn't before recruiting opened up in June. Citizen was probably looking out of state. LSU had a little bit of work to do. They had some catching up to do, and they did that in very quick time. They got Citizen into town for an unofficial visit, and then they got him in for his official visit right before the dead period ended. And that really kind of parlayed into them being able to secure his commitment. And it's at a position of need. They need a running back. Obviously, the other big running back in Louisiana that LSU had already offered, LeVeon Moss, he committed to Alabama at the beginning of the month. And so coming in and being able to get Citizen, I think is really big in several ways. It's a position of need. I don't know how many running backs are really going to be able to take in this class. And so to be able to get one with that quality that can come in 2022, he'll have a chance to, his sophomore year, he'll have a chance to be able to compete for a starting job, I think. And so just a big get all the way around.
What does that do for LeVeon Moss? I know that they hadn't let off the gas on recruiting Moss right here in Baton Rouge out of Estruma, who pledged his commitment to Nick Saban and Alabama. But LeVeon Moss and his status right now in recruiting with LSU, where does it stand?
They're still recruiting him. They're still trying to flip him. And Wild Bill and I were talking about this yesterday, and I kind of take a different stance from he and even Shay. That everyone seems to think that LSU needs 2 running backs in this class. But when I look at LSU's roster, 2022, you're going to have Ty Davis Price and John Emery Jr. If neither one of them blow up this year and go pro, or there's no attrition, you're going to have those 2 guys as seniors. You have Josh Williams, who's going to be a junior. You have Amani Goodwin and Corey Kiner, who would either be freshmen or sophomores, depending on how much they play in this upcoming season right here. And then you add Citizen to that group. I mean, that's a pretty crowded running back room right there. If LSU picks up Kendrick Law could possibly play some running back, play some wide receiver. Jake Peets wants to get the ball in his hands in so many ways. And so that kind of leaves me to question whether or not LSU really needs another running back in this class when you consider all of the other spots that they have. Because I've mentioned this on your show before, that I think in this day and age of recruiting, you almost have to have a couple of spots that you save for the transfer portal.
Right.
You know, the days of signing 25, in my opinion, are gone. If you want to be able to manage your roster 365 days a year, then you almost have to have a little bit of backup, especially as good as LSU has done on the transfer market. Man, look at all of the transfers that they have gotten that have made an immediate impact just since, you know, in the last 3 or 4 years, you know, and you're going to lose some guys at some positions. You're going to lose some veterans. You're going to have some guys that, you know, your number 2 guy may see a better chance to start at Oklahoma next year. So he goes and transfers over there. And then let's say your starter gets hurt. All of a sudden, man, you could be in a bind if you don't have, you know, if you haven't really filled up along that depth chart. And so, you know, and so I think it's going to be very interesting to see what LSU does at that position. It's going to be very interesting to see how they juggle the numbers at a lot of positions in this class, just because of the uncertainty of, you know, how many do you sign? How many do you keep in your back pocket to, you know, to fill up in the summer, to fill up right before school starts?
What have you heard on Brad Davis and the impact he's had on the recruiting trail? He's got a couple of monsters in the class, and Will Campbell and Beau Bordelon. How does the offensive line board look, and what have you heard on the early routine, the early return on Davis on the recruiting trail?
Austin Deculus, and you spoke with him and stuff. Austin Deculus talked really good about Brad Davis, you know, at media days. They talk about how he is a little bit more of a disciplinarian. He, you know, he likes for his guys to, you know, kind of follow the path that they set, that they lay out for them. And he probably, the early feedback that I've gotten is that he is a little more stringent on making sure that they follow that path. And I think some of that probably comes with, you know, obviously with being thrown into the mix when he did. You really don't have a whole lot of time to rub elbows and get to know everybody before you kind of lay down your law. You kind of have to lay down that law while you're in your summer workouts and all. But everyone seems to love him. You know, there hasn't been, when you lose a guy like James Craig, who has recruited these guys for, you know, going on 2 years, sometimes 3 years now, you expect there to be some kind of drop off. But when you talk to Will Campbell, when you talk to Beau Bordelon, when you talk to a lot of the guys, there isn't any drop off. And I think a reason for that is Brad Davis was so active in recruiting at Arkansas that the recruitments of these kids kind of crossed over. And so, you know, I think Brad Davis is going to be fantastic. And I think that you're going to really start to see like a little bit more of his impact once the coaches are able to get out on the road in the fall. And that's when some new guys are going to pop up on the board. That's when some guys are going to impress them the first few weeks of their senior season. And then you'll see some new offensive line targets kind of pop up. I think that's when you're really going to see the impact that Brad Davis can make.
How accurate do you think the evaluations of these kids are because of COVID? I feel like there has to be a lot of kids who have fallen through the cracks, especially with the star ratings they've gotten or evaluations, just because of the COVID restrictions, how tough high schools were. And sometimes you get stories of, this was the first time I've ever met a kid. I'm like, he was that tall? Like, coaches haven't been able to see these kids.
Yeah, I think that kind of plays into it, but I also think that, you know, when it comes to kids that, you know, okay, you can't verify, you know, you can't verify the heights on them. You know, there's kind of a golden rule, a standard rule that, you know, if a high school coach says a kid is 6'5", an offensive lineman 6'5", you know, any coach getting paid the kind of money these college coaches are making, you know, they're gonna, in their mind, they're gonna say, okay, so this kid's probably 6'3.5". If he shows up 6'4", you're surprised. Right. You're very happy, you know. But you know, so I don't think it really affects it that much from that standpoint. I think the biggest impact of it, though, is these kids aren't able to get on campus. They aren't able to spend 48 hours with the coaches. They aren't able to spend all that time with the players, and you get a situation like Jalen Sheed, you know, the tight end from Mississippi shows up, he's here for one day, gets homesick, wants to go back home. And so it's a lot harder to I think it's a lot harder for the coaches to do those. And when I say character, I don't mean that this guy was a bad kid or anything,
sure.
but it's a lot harder to be able to see, okay, how these kids are, because you don't spend as much face time with them. You don't spend as much time with them, see like, okay, this kid's a mama's boy. He and his mom are super, super tight. She's not going to be able to get here, to watch him play every week, but you got Memphis that's right up the road. You got Ole Miss that's right up the road. So I think that is where the biggest hindrances for these coaches and these pandemic evaluations are going to pop up at. It's just not getting to know the kids and their families as well through Zoom calls as they would sitting across from them, on their kitchen table 4 weeks in a row from, the last game after Thanksgiving until the early signing period. Coaches didn't have that crunch time last year, so they weren't able to sit there and really get to know these families the way that they would like to. So I think that's going to be the thing that you have to deal with, and I think you'll probably see that next year, the year after that, with more kids around the country from this class hitting the transfer portal.
You mentioned Sheed leaving, and it makes me think about the attrition at the tight end position for LSU. Did you evaluate Cole Taylor, and what kind of skill set can we expect from him because he seems to be the guy that you pencil in at LSU? So what's his skill set, and what does he bring to the table in terms of a tight end?
Well, he's picked up. He's gained a little bit of weight. He's gained a little bit of weight. And one thing Cole Taylor did in high school is that he probably about 90% of the time he lined out wide. He wasn't in as an H-back. He didn't line up as an inline guy a whole lot. So all of that was kind of new to him. Obviously, at 6'7", 235 pounds, you knew the kid needed to put on some weight, and he has done that. Now, I think he's now getting closer to that type of guy, to where you can, if you do need to go to tight end, that you could go with Nick Storrs and you go with Cole Taylor. But I think I think LSU's game has really, and LSU's philosophy is really kind of transforming to where, you can say they have a tight end on the field to go with three other wide receivers, but really, you're basically looking at four wide receivers, because if you go back to 2019, you flank Thad Moss all the way out wide. Well, why do you have to flank a 245-pound tight end out there? Why can't you put a 220-pounder like Jack Besh out there? A 225-pounder like Jake Johnson, who is also going to be a big threat. So I'm not a huge proponent that LSU is so far behind the eight ball now at the tight end position, because after this year you have Nick Storrs, who's a senior, you have Cole Taylor, who will either be a sophomore or a junior depending on how he wants to do his classification, with last year not counting. You're going to have Jack Besh, and then you're going to have Jake Johnson. And so that's why Shay and Billy think they're pretty strong proponents that LSU needs another tight end in this class to kind of replenish those ranks. But that's another position that I look at and I say, okay, do you really need two tight ends in this class? You got the number one tight end in the country coming in Jake Johnson. You got Jack Besh, who I think is going to put up a ton of numbers this year, and he's really going to be just an electric kind of tight end / wide receiver. And so, why do you really need to get another tight end who is just going to be put in there on 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2 situations? Take the Sean Payton approach. Take your most athletic offensive lineman, who is a backup, and put him out there and let him do the same thing. Because if you've got a guy, let's say Jalen Sheed would have played this year. Well, Jalen Sheed's in the game. No one's going to be worried about his receiving skills. This kid caught, I think, maybe 8 or 9 passes as a senior. His team never threw the ball. He was never known for his pass-catching ability. And so, how does LSU address that? How does LSU address the tight end position in this class right here? Because like you mentioned, you're already at 15 commitments. Let's say you only got room for 8 more. All of a sudden, you start squeezing in some guys like a Quincy Wiggins, another defensive end, another safety. You need to get another couple of offensive tackles. You got another wide receiver. You got another Kendrick Law. You got Kendrick Law out there. All of a sudden, those numbers start getting really tight to try to start squeezing in what I think is multiple guys at a position that you're only going to have one at that position on the field 95% of the time.
You mentioned Wiggins, and I spoke to a recruiter at LSU who said that they have Wiggins, the number one player on the board right now, because his position is more demanding on draft spot, being in a defensive end, that there's more demand on his position. How do you evaluate Wiggins, and where's his recruiting stand here in midsummer heading into his senior season?
That dude is an absolute freak. Woo. He is an absolute freak, man. I can't.
Man, a few words.
You know, I can't. Yeah, I can't recall someone off the top of my head in Louisiana in the recent classes that you just looked at and you said, "Man, that dude looks like a Greek god." Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, he is just physically. You know, you're talking about a guy 6'5", 6'6", 270 pounds. And I mean, no fat on him whatsoever. Just chiseled, yoked up, and I mean, this dude is just a physical specimen. The way you draw them up. Now, if his game translates, and I think it's going to as a senior, because I think what you're going to see is now you're going to see a guy who is going to be comfortable with his technique, who will not be thinking on every play as much as he had to last year as a junior. He's going to play a lot faster. He's going to play a lot more explosive as a senior. And I think you're going to see those numbers really take a major rise as far as his recruiting rankings go. So to hear someone say that, I'm not surprised. I mean, I can remember at that first camp that we talked about with Will Campbell and Quincy Wiggins, the battles that they had at that LSU O-line D-line camp. Yeah. And as soon as it wrapped up, you know, one of LSU's coaches walked by me and he was like, "If that dude ain't a 5-star, I don't know who is." Seriously. I said, point noted, Coach. I'm going to pass that on.
I mean, he looks like how you would sketch it. I mean, if you were to say, draw me a 5-star defensive end, I feel like people would give you a sketch of Quincy Wiggins in return. I mean, he just looks like he's got everything. This wide receiver class that they just inked, you mentioned Jack Besh, is probably the headliner of the group when you talk about Brian Thomas, Chris Hilton, Malik Neighbors, Jack Besh all being in the class. How about this current class that's headlined by Dakotas Crawford and Aaron Anderson out of Edna Carr, who I know just who took home the wide receiver MVP honors at the Under Armour Dallas regional camp. How do you like this wide receiver class here in 22?
I love Aaron Anderson. I thought Dakotas Crawford really, really impressed at the LSU camp. He went against every top DB they had, and he just made play after play after play. So I think Dakotas Crawford fans might look at his recruiting ranking and see a 3-star and not get too feeling good about it as they do when they look at some others. But remember, DJ Chark was a 3-star. There's some other guys at LSU assigned who have been 3-stars too, so don't let that bother you. I think those two are going to be fine. A.J. Johnson's the one I kind of have some questions about. I wonder how his game is going to translate to the next level because, I think the speed might be a little bit of a question. We're going to see a lot more of him this year with Arch Manning throwing the ball. More than he did this past season with, limited games and things like that. But, overall, I think the wide receiver class, I think it's a good class. I don't think it's the class that they signed in 2021, but I don't think it has to be either. You look at that class they signed in 2021, and I mean, outside of Alabama and Ohio State, I don't think there's another school in the country that could come close to matching what LSU signed as far as receivers go. So, I think when you look at, when you look at this class right here, and then when you look at the 2023 class, how it's shaping up in Louisiana, wide receiver is one position that LSU has never had a problem recruiting. And I'm talking about when LSU should have every problem in the world recruiting a wide receiver. Yeah. They never did. Look when they signed, OBJ, Jarvis Landry, Malachi Dupre, Ruben Randall. You go down the list, and this is when Les Miles was running running backs into brick walls on 3rd and 8. And so Louisiana always produces at those skill positions right there. So I don't think that's ever going to be a position that LSU is going to really have to worry about.
They got Walker Howard committed to the class. It seems like he's had a great summer, finished in the top 3 at the Elite 11. How about down the line for 2023? We saw Eli Holstein commit to Texas A&M. We've seen Arch Manning go on the recruiting tour. And then a quarterback that people may not be talking about a lot, Sonny, is right here in Baton Rouge, and Ricky Collins over at Woodlawn, who's in that same group. How are you evaluating that quarterback class down the line?
I like Ricky Collins a lot, and he's another guy that I think you're going to see. When you look at his 2020 numbers as opposed to what he does in 2021, I think he's just going to put up a lot better numbers this year. Yeah. Ricky Collins is never a guy that's going to go to a camp setting and is going to just completely blow you away, because so much of his skill set, so much of what makes him a dangerous quarterback, you really can't evaluate. He can't put on display, and that's his ability to make plays with his feet, his ability to keep plays extended, not getting sacked, being able to get away from pressure. All of those are traits that, that show up on film, but you're not going to really see at a camp setting. What impressed me was that Ricky Collins he threw for Jake Peets, not once, not twice, but like 3 times this summer in the month of June. He went there, he earned his offer, and, I think that at the end of the day, I think that Ricky Collins is going to be that in-state quarterback that LSU signs in 2023. And I think that, I know that fans are going to be, they're all up in arms over Arch Manning, as they should. The kid's fantastic. I mean, look, there's no question about that. Eli Holstein, very good quarterback, going to Texas A&M, not surprised by that at all. But I think Ricky Collins is a guy that fans will get to know very quickly, and that he will be that type of guy that once they hear him talk a couple of times, once they hear how humble, how passionate he is, they're just going to fall in love with him.
I'm with you, Sonny. I mean, I've seen him play basketball too. I mean, he is a natural leader. Anywhere he is, I mean, when he speaks, people listen. And I love the story of how he worked out for Jake Peets. However many times you guys need me to work out, I'll do it. He's never backed down from anything, and I believe he is a fast riser as far as recruits and going here. A lot of off-season talk about LSU's quarterback. Before I get you out of here, just give me one thought on where you stand heading into what seems like is going to be a really good competition between Myles Brennan and Max Johnson to see who the starter is.
Yeah, I still take the same path I took after the spring, and Jordy, I just keep going back to, look, man, if it's really this close between Max Johnson and Myles Brennan, and you really feel like you got 2 quarterbacks right there. You're basing that off of a Myles Brennan that, I mean, what was Myles Brennan during the spring? Maybe 85% or so. I mean, he didn't have that same zip on the ball. He wasn't able to really build up that core, work those abdominal muscles to re-strengthen them, to get them back to where they were before he got hurt. So when he does get 100%, and I think he will be 100% for fall camp, how is that going to translate then? Is 100% Myles Brennan still not good enough to overtake Max Johnson? I do think 100% Myles Brennan will probably win the job against UCLA, but I think both these guys are going to play. I think both of these guys are going to play. I think they're both going to have to play, because we see it only takes one high ankle sprain for a guy to miss 3 or 4 weeks, and so put me down for in the camp of that. I think Myles Brennan is going to take the first snaps at UCLA, and but Max Johnson is going to get snaps there too.
Always great to catch up with you, man. Great stuff and great information. If you want to catch up with Sonny Shipp, you can always follow him on Twitter. He is at Sonny Shipp 247 is where you can follow him there. They've got a great write-up on TreVonte Citizen up on the board right now that you can find, that was authored by Sonny Shipp, talking about the impact of Citizen on this class and what he means for the running back room. And as always, great to catch up. Thank you, man.
All right, brother. Be good, man.
Yes, sir. There is Sonny Shipp checking in here on this Wednesday morning, talking a lot of recruiting.